Hey everyone, I'm Mike Settele, the founder of Settele Tutoring, and this is the first episode in a 10-part series that is going to cover all the main strategies for the new digital SAT. All right, we're going to start with the reading section because that's where I get by far the most questions from my subscribers. But we will cover the math strategies in future episodes. So please make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that way you don't miss those new episodes. I'm constantly also releasing new materials, new lessons, all for free. Plus, it's a great way to show your support for me and for free SAT prep. And in this first lesson, I am going to teach you about the single most important strategy for the reading section. In fact, most of the other reading strategies are really just versions of this main idea. Use dumb summaries, okay? Whenever you're given a passage, an answer choice, a chart, a vocab word, the question itself, you can dumb it down, you can simplify it, you can remove details to focus on the essential ideas inside. And I should point out that this is pretty much the opposite of what we're taught in school. So if you're reading, let's say, Romeo and Juliet, and your teacher asks you to summarize the main idea, you can't just say love and war. Your teacher's going to want way more than that. They're going to usually want it in a 5-paragraph essay talking about the specific scenes in the play that support your idea. And that is a valuable skill, but it's not one that we need for the SAT, mostly because we just don't have that kind of time. We have to move fast. We have to cut to the core of a passage really quickly and confidently, and dumb summaries let us do that. So let me show you how a dumb summary would work using a question that I know would make most people groan, a 200-year-old poem, okay? So the question itself is just asking for us to capture the main idea. So it's very simple. And as we read the poem, we can just kind of listen for the overall vibe. In fact, the best dumb summaries are often just the connotations of what we're reading, positive, negative, or some combination of the two. So as I read this aloud, try to notice the individual words that stand out to you as having a strong connotation, and then we'll kind of add them up and try to find an overall connotation of the poem. All right, here we go. O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm, has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy. All right, so is this poem positive, negative, or something else? My dumb summary is that this poem has a negative connotation. There are a lot of negative words in this passage. Sick, worm, night, howling storm, destroy. Now, I will admit, there are some positive words too, like joy and love. But think about the context. It's a dark secret love, okay? Sounds bad. And even if joy is positive, just think about how much it's outweighed by all of those negative words, okay? So I really go with just what the majority is saying here, and it seems like most of the words are negative, so I'm going to classify this passage as negative as well. And then I'm going to hope that I can find an answer choice that also, as if I dumb summarize it, will be negative so that I can find a nice match. So let's just go through them. Choice A, to celebrate the harmony between life and death in nature. Well, that sounds positive to me. Celebrate harmony, these are positive ideas, and it's very unlikely that we're going to use a positive answer choice to summarize a negative passage. So this is probably wrong. Choice B, to explore the complex relationship between decay and rebirth. Well, decay is negative, but rebirth is positive. So this is much more of a mixed connotation. Maybe it's right. I mean, there are some positive words in the poem, but I don't know. I'd really like the choice to be much more negative since the passage is much more negative too. Let's look at choice C. To show how different species interact in the environment. Well, okay. How do they react? Do they interact in a good way or in a bad way? This is a great example where we have a choice that has no connotation at all. It's kind of going out of its way not to take a side. So that's probably not right since we clearly had a negative passage. We want a very clear negative choice. And choice D is going to do that for us. To lament the power of corrupting forces in the world. Okay, so maybe you don't know exactly what lament means, but I bet that you've encountered that word at some point before, and you probably have a vague sense that it's negative. And corrupting is definitely negative. So we have a lot here. This is definitely going to be the answer. We have a negative answer choice summarizing a negative passage. It's really a great fit. And we won't always get that lucky, but it does happen a lot that we don't need to get into the details to find the one right answer. In fact, notice we did not reread this passage a dozen times to understand it. We read it once, we picked up on some words, and we were able to summarize it pretty confidently and get the right answer. Now, there are going to be some harder passages and harder questions to come, and so we'll talk about those in other episodes. We'll get into some more advanced reading strategies to deal with that complexity. So, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those. But for now, I really want to focus on how powerful it can be to just focus on the connotations. So let's take a look at a vocab question where even if we don't know the specific definitions of the words, we might be able to use the connotations to help us. So as I read any short vocabulary passage, I'm always thinking about connotation. I'm always creating dumb summaries the same way that we did before. I think about the connotations of individual words, and then I try to kind of sum them all up and think about an overall connotation of the passage. So as I read this, I'm going to highlight the words that I think matter. So let's take a look at the first sentence here. The United States Congress commissioned Horatio Greenough to sculpt a statue honoring the country's first president on the centennial of his birth in 1832. The final work, known as Enthroned Washington, was blank in the press by those who felt it inappropriate, even offensive, to depict George Washington as bare-chested and muscular. Criticism of the statue continued for decades until it was eventually removed from the National Mall in 1908. So maybe this thing starts out positive, okay? But the blank clearly needs a negative. There's a definite shift in this passage, and we have a lot of negative words telling us what the press probably thought of this statue, this weird, jacked George Washington statue. Now we can look at the answer choices, and we can still do the same thing, try to think about the connotations of these words. So maybe we can't specifically define each of them, but we should have a sense of their connotation. Hopefully you know that promoted and validated are both positive words, okay? So it's not likely that they're going to be right. We would really not want to put a positive word in this blank that clearly needs a negative word. The other two are a little hard. Refuted is an important word to know. Maybe you've already encountered it at some point in your SAT prep, but maybe you don't quite know the definition. You don't have an ability to recite it. That's okay. I'm hoping that you have some kind of memory that it's a negative word. And then excoriated is maybe even less familiar, but I'm hoping also that just kind of maybe based on the spelling, like the way it sounds, like you can also sense that it's probably negative too. Now, if we have no idea what either of these words mean, then we just need to pick something and move on. So just, you got a 50-50 shot. That's pretty good for just knowing the connotations. So that's not so bad, and you pick something and move on. But I have a feeling that you probably do know a little bit more about that word refute, because it is common enough that you've probably encountered it at some point before and looked up its definition. And you probably sense that it doesn't quite work here. It means to prove wrong. So it wouldn't really make sense in this context, right? The press is refuting the statue. So, I mean, you can refute an argument, but you can't really refute a work of art, or you can't refute a statue. So it just doesn't really fit with what's going on here. And so that might be enough then to pick excoriated, which is the correct answer. And to be clear, excoriate means to severely criticize. So it is perfect. That is exactly what the press is doing. They're calling it inappropriate and offensive. It says criticism later on. So excoriate is the perfect fit for this blank. And even if you had no idea, the connotations are really helping us out here. They're giving us a sense of what we should be looking for, and they're eliminating some answer choices that maybe are traps or maybe tempting for other reasons, but it's letting us focus on a few key ideas instead of everything at once. And hopefully, the next time you encounter words like refute and excoriate, you will remember the definitions. But even if you don't, I think you're going to remember the dumb summary connotation of the word. And again, that might be enough to get a question right, either by eliminating it or, picking it if that's what we need. Let's do one more question where the connotation is going to help us out a lot. This is one of the SAT's transition questions. And you can tell from the answer choices that we're going to need to connect the ideas in these sentences. So once again, we're going to just try to keep it as dumb as possible as we read these, okay? So for the first sentence, Mr. Rogers believed that children's programming was an essential part of emotional and social education. To me, this is positive. We have a couple of words that I can vaguely construe as positive. It's not super positive, but it's definitely not negative. So let's keep reading. He testified in Congress on behalf of increased funding for public broadcasting. His persuasive argument was largely responsible for shifting the consensus among lawmakers to fully fund the fledgling PBS channel. There's even more positive ideas here. It's clear to me that our dumb summary is that we have a continuous string of positive ideas. Okay, so I want a transition word that is going to reflect that. And right away, I know that words like despite this and however aren't going to work because those are transitions that we use to show a contrast, right? So positive to negative or negative to positive. So I can cross those out pretty confidently. For the other two, it's a little trickier. Accordingly and likewise are both words that we would use to kind of continue a connotation, continue an idea. So in a dumb summary way, it's not really going to be enough to just pick the right answer. This is the limit of a dumb summary. Sometimes we have to be a little less dumb and we need to dive a little deeper into what the words mean, what the passages mean, but it's okay. Because as we'll see in future episodes, a dumb summary can be more than a connotation, and these transition words are like a great place to show that. Because as you can see, they're kind of complicated words. They're the kinds of words that you probably don't use in your everyday conversation, but they replace words that we use all the time. So we can dumb these transition words down to like their dumb summary version. So for things like despite this and however, those are basically just fancy versions of the word but. So put the word but in the blank. Does it make sense? No, we're not making a contrast. So yeah, it doesn't work. Likewise is kind of like the word and or also. It continues an idea, it shows maybe a comparison, and accordingly is more like the word so, which we use every single day to show a cause and an effect. So it has a little bit more meaning than the word like likewise. So if we think about them in these kind of dumb terms, these dumb summary versions, I think it's pretty clear that accordingly is the right answer. And we can do that, we can test it by plugging it into the blank, plugging the dumb version into the blank, and kind of making dumb versions of the sentences too. So it says something like, Mr. Rogers believed in children's programming, so he testified on its behalf to Congress, right? That's what they're saying, that flows, that makes logical sense. So the dumb summary helped me understand this complicated idea. And so we don't always get everything we want from the connotation, but I still think that the simplicity of a dumb summary reminds us that we can deal without a lot of the details. We can really focus on things in very simple ways and it will make sense. And so just as a reminder of what this strategy is doing, it's going against what we learn in school. We are told to focus on details. We are told to give specific examples and really like get into the nitty-gritty of what we're reading. We don't have the time for that on an SAT. We have to move faster, and a lot of times it's not even worth our time to dive deeper. We don't have the time, but it's also not really helpful. The best thing to do, keep it simple, dumb it down, and look, if the dumb summary isn't enough, if connotation doesn't get there, or if simplifying the words doesn't get there, we can always read more. We can always dive deeper and look at more details. But you have to start from a place of dumbing it down. Right? Don't do more work than is necessary. Be dumb at first and then do more if you need to. But I think you'll be surprised how often even simple stuff like the connotations of the words in the sentences can help you get an answer very, very quickly. So trust the process a little bit and you will see that the SAT is not as complicated as it might seem at first glance. Now, in future episodes, we're going to talk more about dumb summaries. We're going to show how they work in lots of different kinds of passages and different question types. We're going to talk about how to learn new vocabulary words, especially using like dumb summaries to help you learn them, thinking about the connotation, if not the definition. We'll also talk about how dumb summaries can get a little bit less dumb as we get into more complex passages. And we'll talk about the answer choices, the trap answer choices that the SAT provides for us and how dumb summaries can help us notice them better and hopefully avoid those kinds of mistakes. And of course, we will eventually get to the math section as well. But please make sure that you subscribe to the Settele Tutoring channel so that you never miss a new episode or SAT resource. Because remember, when it comes to your scores, don't settle for less. Settele for more. Thanks for watching.